Buffalo Bills fans, this could be one of the biggest defensive moves on the table before the 2026 season even begins. The Bills are one of 3 teams that have checked on Tampa Bay Buccaneers star defensive tackle Vita Vea, and if Buffalo actually finds a way to land him, their biggest defensive weakness could suddenly become a strength. But there is a catch, and it could stop this entire deal before it ever gets serious. So why is Buffalo looking at Vea right now? And why would Tampa Bay even consider moving one of its most important defensive players? Let's break it down. The Vita Vea situation, according to NFL Network's Mike Garafolo, the Bills are among 3 teams that have checked on Vea's availability. The Chicago Bears and San Francisco 49ers are also believed to have shown interest. That matters because Vea is not just another defensive tackle. He is a 2-time Pro Bowler and one of the most powerful interior defenders in the league. At his best, Vea can completely change how an offense runs the football. But here's where things get complicated. Vea requested a trade from Tampa Bay after contract extension talks failed to produce an agreement. He is entering the final year of his current contract, and the money he is scheduled to make in 2026 is around $18 million. The Buccaneers, however, have not exactly opened the door and invited teams to take him. Tampa Bay has remained firm that it does not want to trade Vea, while still keeping communication open about a possible new contract. So Buffalo may be interested. Vea may want a new deal. But Tampa Bay still wants to keep its star. That is a 3-way problem. And it gets even more interesting when you look at Buffalo's defense. Why Buffalo needs him. The Bills have a very real reason to explore this possibility. Stopping the run has been a major concern, and Buffalo is also dealing with a 3-game suspension for defensive tackle Phidarian Mathis at the beginning of the regular season. That creates an immediate problem in the middle of the defensive line. And this is exactly where Vea could make a huge difference. Vea is the kind of defender who does not need to record 5 sacks to dominate a game. Put 2 offensive linemen on him, and suddenly somebody else gets a 1-on-1 matchup. Leave him alone, and he can destroy the running lane himself. He takes up space. He absorbs blockers. He forces running backs to change direction. And when offenses try to attack the middle, he can make the entire play collapse. For a Buffalo defense trying to become more physical, that type of player is extremely valuable. And there is another reason this could make sense. The Bills have made defensive changes heading into 2026, with Jim Leonhard taking over as defensive coordinator. Adding a massive interior presence like Vea would give Buffalo another weapon for creating pressure and controlling the line of scrimmage. But would Brandon Beane actually pay the price? That's the million-dollar question. Buffalo would potentially have to surrender valuable draft capital and then give Vea the new contract he wants. Beane has shown that he is willing to make aggressive moves when he believes they can help the Bills win. But he also cannot simply throw money and draft picks at every problem. So the Bills have to decide something very important. Is fixing the defensive line worth paying twice? Because that is what this move could require. And if Buffalo does not make that move, another storyline from the preseason is already creating enough excitement around this team. DJ Moore gives Bills fans a scare. The Bills' new offensive weapon gave fans exactly what they wanted to see, and then immediately gave them something to worry about. DJ Moore looked explosive in Buffalo's preseason opener against Carolina. On Buffalo's first 2 offensive drives, Moore caught 3 of 4 passes thrown his way for 61 yards. His biggest play went for 32 yards. He also added catches of 11 and 18 yards. That is exactly why Buffalo made the trade for him. Moore can take a short throw and turn it into a huge gain. He can create after the catch, stretch the defense, and give Josh Allen another dangerous option. But after that 3rd reception, everything changed. A Carolina defender fell onto Moore's right foot and lower leg. Bills fans immediately held their breath. Moore left the field and was checked by Buffalo's medical staff. The good news. The early signs were encouraging. Moore was able to walk off the field, and he was later moving around the sideline without obvious major trouble. There was concern about an ankle injury, but the initial indications did not point toward a severe injury or major structural damage. Further evaluation was still expected. That is obviously important because Moore is not some minor piece of this offense. Buffalo traded the number 60 overall pick and a 5th-round pick to Chicago to bring him in. They expect him to be a major part of an offense built around Josh Allen. And after just a few drives together, the early chemistry was already obvious. Josh Allen finally has another receiver who can turn a normal play into something explosive. But before we call Moore the next superstar in Buffalo, There is another Bills player whose future is much less certain. And this one could come down to special teams. Mecole Hardman's roster battle. Mecole Hardman Jr. has something most players competing for a roster spot simply do not have. 3 Super Bowl rings. He has played in huge games. He has been in pressure situations. He has caught a Super Bowl winning touchdown. But none of that guarantees him a spot on Buffalo's final 53-man roster. That's the reality facing Hardman right now. Buffalo has a crowded receiver room, and the competition is getting serious. DJ Moore is obviously expected to have a major role. Khalil Shakir is a key piece. Keon Coleman is another important young receiver. Josh Palmer is also competing for a major role. And that leaves players like Hardman fighting for the remaining opportunities. So here's the question for Bills fans. If Hardman is not giving Buffalo enough as a receiver, is his value as a returner enough to keep him on the roster? Drop your answer in the comments. Keep Hardman or cut Hardman. Because this battle could come down to one specific job. The punt returner position. Hardman has been getting work as Buffalo's punt returner, and that could be his biggest path onto the final roster. He does not need to become the team's number 2 receiver. He may not even need a huge offensive role. If he can give Buffalo explosive plays in the return game while also providing depth at receiver, that could be enough. And his experience matters. Hardman spent most of his career with the Kansas City Chiefs and was part of 3 Super Bowl winning teams. He also caught the overtime touchdown from Patrick Mahomes that gave Kansas City the victory over San Francisco in Super Bowl 58. That kind of experience is hard to ignore. But NFL teams do not keep players simply because they have championship rings. They keep players because they can help win the next game. That is where Hardman's preseason becomes extremely important. Buffalo needs to see speed. It needs to see reliable hands. It needs to see impact on special teams. And most importantly, it needs to see a reason to keep him instead of another receiver. Recent Bills roster projections have started to include Hardman, partly because the punt returner competition remains unsettled. That gives him a real opportunity. But opportunity is not the same thing as security. And the clock is ticking. The Bills have 3 big questions. Buffalo is now entering one of the most important parts of the preseason. There are questions on defense. There are questions about injuries. And there are serious roster battles happening across the offense and special teams. First, the Vita Vea situation. The Bills have checked on his availability. Vea is looking for a new contract. Tampa Bay still wants to keep him. And Buffalo has to decide how much it is willing to give up for a player who could immediately change the middle of its defense.
Second, DJ Moore.
The debut was extremely promising. 3 catches, 61 yards, a 32-yard explosive play, and then the injury scare. For now, the most encouraging part is that Moore was able to move around after leaving the field. Buffalo will still need to monitor his status closely. And third, Mecole Hardman. His experience is impressive. His Super Bowl history is impressive. But the Bills need production right now. If Hardman can become a dangerous return specialist and make plays on offense, he can force his way onto this roster. If not, Buffalo has other options. And that makes every preseason snap matter. The Bills' final 53-man roster deadline is August 30th, so there is not much time left for players on the bubble to make their case. That is why these next few weeks are so important. One big return could save a player's season. One explosive catch could change a receiver's future. And one trade could completely change Buffalo's defense. So now I want to hear from you. Should the Bills go all in and make a serious push for Vita Vea? Do you believe DJ Moore can become Josh Allen's new elite weapon after what we saw in the preseason opener? And most importantly, would you keep Mecole Hardman because of his return ability and championship experience? Let me know your answer. Because Buffalo is not simply preparing for another season. The Bills are trying to build a roster that can finally finish the job. And if Vita Vea ends up in Buffalo, DJ Moore stays healthy, and Hardman wins his roster battle, this team could look very different when the real games begin.